Officer Lee Sung-ho sat in his police car, watching the peaceful streets of Oak Ridge. The expensive houses and perfect lawns made this neighborhood one of the city's safest areas. Lee had worked here for 5 years, and he liked keeping it that way, safe and quiet. The evening sun was setting when he noticed someone walking on the sidewalk. It was a young black teenager wearing a backpack. The boy walked with his head down, looking at his phone. Lee's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't recognize the teenager from the neighborhood. "Dispatch, this is Officer Lee. I'm checking out a suspicious person on Maple Street," he said into his radio. Lee started his car and drove slowly behind the teenager. The boy must have heard the car because he looked back. His eyes went wide when he saw the police car. He quickly put his phone in his pocket and kept walking, but faster now. Lee turned on his lights. "Stop right there," he called through his speaker. The teenager stopped and turned around slowly, his hands visible at his sides. "Is there a problem, officer?" the boy asked. His voice was clear and steady, but Lee could see fear in his eyes. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Lee got out of his car, his right hand resting on his taser. "I'm walking home from the library, sir. I live on Oak Street with my father." The teenager spoke politely, but Lee didn't like how the boy kept looking at his hand near the taser. "ID," Lee demanded. The boy reached for his back pocket, moving slowly. "Sir, I'm just getting my wallet," the teenager said. "My name is Marcus Williams. I live at 1242 Oak Street." Lee's fingers gripped his taser tighter. Something about this kid made him nervous. Maybe it was how calm he seemed, or how he kept explaining his movements. It felt rehearsed, suspicious. "Turn around and put your hands on your head," Lee ordered. "But sir, I haven't done anything wrong." "Here's my ID." Marcus held out his wallet. "I said turn around." Lee's voice got louder. A few neighbors came out onto their porches. Some had their phones out, recording. Marcus started to turn, but then his phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. His hand moved down automatically to check it. Lee saw the movement and reacted. In one quick motion, he pulled out his taser and fired. The electric probes hit Marcus in the chest. The boy fell hard onto the sidewalk, his body shaking from the shock. His phone and wallet scattered across the ground. As Marcus lay there twitching, a woman ran out from a nearby house. "Oh my God, what are you doing?" "That's Dr. Williams' son. He lives here." Lee stood frozen, the taser still in his hand. More neighbors gathered, their phones recording everything. Marcus's wallet had fallen open, showing his school ID from Oak Ridge Academy, one of the city's best private schools. "Someone call an ambulance," a voice shouted, "and someone needs to contact his father." Lee felt sick as he watched the paramedics load Marcus into the ambulance 20 minutes later. The boy was conscious but dazed, his eyes full of pain and confusion. One of the neighbors, an older woman, stepped up to Lee. "His father is Dr. James Williams," she said coldly. "He's leading humanity's first diplomatic mission to another solar system. What do you think will happen when he finds out a police officer tasered his innocent son?" Lee looked down at his shaking hands. In 15 years of police work, he had never felt more wrong. But it was too late now. The videos were already spreading online, and somewhere in deep space, Marcus's father was about to learn what had happened to his son. The emergency room buzzed with activity as doctors checked Marcus's condition. Officer Lee stood in the hospital hallway, his face pale and his uniform feeling too tight around his neck. His police captain, Kim Doohan, walked quickly toward him with a stern expression. "What were you thinking, Lee?" Captain Kim's voice was quiet but angry. He held up his phone, showing a video of the incident that already had millions of views. The boy was following every protocol. He did everything right. Lee stared at the floor. "I thought he was reaching for something." "His phone." He was reaching for his phone. Captain Kim cut him off. "And now do you know what I just learned? His father is Dr. James Williams. Does that name mean anything to you?" Lee shook his head. Dr. Williams is leading Earth's first diplomatic mission to meet an advanced alien civilization. He's trying to get medical technology that could save millions of lives. And you just tasered his son for walking home from the library. The weight of what he had done hit Lee hard. He sat down heavily in a plastic chair, his legs weak. Can I apologize to him? Not now. The hospital is keeping him overnight for observation. And his aunt is here. She has temporary guardianship while his father is in space. She doesn't want you anywhere near him. Down the hall, Marcus lay in a hospital bed, his chest still aching where the taser probes had hit him. His aunt Regina sat beside him, holding his hand and talking on the phone. Yes, they're trying to send a message to James now, she said to someone. But he's at the edge of our communication range. It could take days to reach him. She squeezed Marcus's hand. The doctors say Marcus will be okay physically, but her voice trailed off as she looked at her nephew's face. Marcus stared at the ceiling, trying not to cry. He had done everything his father had taught him about dealing with the police, kept his hands visible, spoke clearly, moved slowly. None of it had mattered. In the hospital waiting room, reporters gathered, held back by security guards. The story was spreading fast. Son of Earth's lead space diplomat tasered by police officer in his own neighborhood. Officer Lee's phone kept buzzing with messages from other officers and friends who had seen the video. Some tried to defend him, saying the job was dangerous and split-second decisions were hard. But most expressed shock and disappointment. Late that night, as Marcus finally fell asleep in his hospital room, a message traveled through space at the speed of light. It carried news that would change not just Earth's diplomatic mission, but the future of human and alien relations. The next morning, Captain Kim called Lee into his office. "You're suspended pending investigation," he said, holding out his hand for Lee's badge and gun. But that's not the worst part. He turned his computer screen to show Lee a message from space. The Park Dynasty, the advanced alien civilization Earth was trying to make contact with, had seen the video. They wanted to know how humans could expect to handle diplomatic relations with an alien species when they couldn't even treat their own people with respect. "Your actions didn't just hurt that boy," Captain Kim said. "You may have damaged humanity's first chance at peaceful contact with an advanced civilization. They're questioning everything about our society now." Lee placed his badge and gun on the desk with shaking hands. As he walked out of the police station, reporters shouted questions at him, but he had no answers. How could he explain that his fear and prejudice might have cost humanity its chance at a better future? Back at the hospital, Marcus watched the morning news on his room's TV. His story was everywhere now, but all he could think about was his father, out there in space, still not knowing what had happened to his son back on Earth. Dr. James Williams stood at the viewing window of the Earth ship Unity, watching the stars. The Park Dynasty's home system glowed ahead, its 3 suns creating beautiful patterns of light. But Dr. Williams wasn't thinking about the view. He had just received the message about Marcus. "Dr. Williams." A soft voice came from behind him. He turned to see Ambassador Park Ji-won, the leader of the Park Dynasty's diplomatic team. Her elegant blue uniform seemed to shimmer in the starlight. "Ambassador Park," Williams said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I apologize, but I need to return to Earth immediately." "I understand your pain," Park Ji-won said. "We all watched the video. My people are concerned." Williams closed his eyes for a moment. "The officer has been suspended. There will be an investigation." "This is not about one officer," Park Ji-won interrupted gently. "We have been watching Earth for many years. We see how some of your people treat others because of their skin color. It makes us wonder if humans are ready for our medical technology." The medical technology. Williams felt his heart sink. The Parks had offered to share treatments that could cure most human diseases. It would save millions of lives. Now that might be lost because of what happened to Marcus. "Please," Williams said, "don't judge all of humanity by the actions of one person." "But it is not one person, is it?" Park Jae-won walked to the window. We have seen thousands of similar videos. Your son did everything right, yet he was still attacked. How can we trust humans with advanced technology when they cannot trust each other? In the ship's communication room, the rest of the Earth team watched news reports from home. The story had grown bigger. People were protesting in cities around the world. Some demanded justice for Marcus. Others worried about losing the park's medical technology. Williams's second in command, Dr. Sarah Chen, rushed into the room. The park's council wants to meet with us. All of them. This has never happened before. Williams straightened his uniform. He had to be a diplomat now, not just a worried father. But as he walked to the council chamber, his hands kept shaking. The council chamber was beautiful, with walls that looked like flowing water. 12 Park Dynasty leaders sat around a curved table. They all had the same shimmering blue uniforms as Ambassador Park. Dr. Williams, the head counselor, said, "We have watched the video of your son's attack many times. We have also studied your world's history of racial prejudice. It troubles us deeply." Williams stood tall. Earth has many problems, yes, but we are trying to be better. That's why this incident has caused such outrage. Most humans know it was wrong. Ambassador Park stepped forward. The council has made a decision. We will not withdraw our offer of medical technology. Williams felt relief flood through him, but Park held up her hand. However, we have conditions. The head counselor nodded. We have technology that can help humans understand each other better. Before we share our medical knowledge, we want to test this technology on the officer who attacked your son. What kind of technology? Williams asked. We call it the Empathy Immersion Protocol. Ambassador Park explained. It lets someone experience life through another person's eyes. Every memory, every feeling, every moment of fear or joy. Williams thought about Marcus, lying in a hospital bed on Earth. He thought about Officer Lee, whose prejudice had nearly destroyed everything. If Officer Lee agrees to this, Park continued, we believe it could help not just him, but your whole world understand each other better. The fate of Earth's deal with the parks now rested on whether one prejudiced police officer would agree to see the world through the eyes of those he feared. Ambassador Park Ji-won sat in her private chamber aboard the Unity, reviewing Earth's news reports. Videos of Marcus's tasering played on multiple screens. She watched Officer Lee's face in each replay, studying his expressions of fear and anger. You wish to speak with me, Ambassador. Dr. Williams entered the chamber, looking tired. 3 days had passed since he learned about Marcus's attack. Yes, Park gestured to a chair. Our council has finished its discussion. We believe this incident presents an opportunity. Williams sat down slowly. An opportunity to help humanity grow. Park touched a crystal on her desk, and a hologram appeared between them. It showed a device that looked like a silver crown. This is our empathy immersion device. It allows one person to fully experience another's life memories. And you want to use this on Officer Lee. Williams leaned forward to study the hologram. If he agrees. Park's voice was gentle but firm. We have watched Earth struggle with prejudice for many years. Your people try to solve it with laws and training, but they cannot change what is in the heart. This device can. Back on Earth, Officer Lee sat alone in his apartment. The walls of news coverage around him grew higher each day. Some people defended him, saying he was just doing his job. Others called him the man who might cost Earth its chance at miraculous medical treatments. His phone rang. It was Captain Kim. Lee, the captain said, I need you to come to the station. Now, we have received a message from the Park Dynasty. 30 minutes later, Lee sat in the captain's office, watching a recorded message from Ambassador Park. She explained the empathy immersion device and what it would mean. If you agree, Park's image said, you will experience every memory, every emotion, every moment of Marcus Williams's life. You will know what it feels like to grow up as he did, to face what he faces, to live in his skin. Lee felt his throat tighten. And if I refuse? Captain Kim turned off the message. Then the parks will likely withdraw their medical technology offer. Millions could die without those treatments. So I have no choice, Lee said bitterly. You always have a choice, a new voice said. They turned to see Marcus's Aunt Regina standing in the doorway, just like you had a choice that day on the street. Regina walked into the office, her eyes fixed on Lee. My nephew is still having nightmares. He jumps every time he hears a police siren, but he agreed to share his memories with you. He wants you to understand. Lee looked down at his hands. Will it hurt? Ambassador Park says no, Captain Kim replied. But you will feel everything Marcus has felt. Every joy, every fear, every time someone looked at him with suspicion for no reason. Every time he had to teach himself to move slowly, speak softly, keep his hands visible, just to stay safe. Through the office window, Lee could see reporters still camped outside the police station. His actions had put him at the center of humanity's most important diplomatic crisis. Now the only way forward was to literally walk in another person's shoes. When? Lee asked quietly. The device will arrive tomorrow on a Park Dynasty shuttle, Captain Kim said. Ambassador Park herself is coming to oversee the procedure. That night, as Lee lay in bed staring at his ceiling, he wondered what it would feel like to be Marcus Williams. To be someone he had hurt through his own fear and prejudice. Tomorrow, he would find out. The Park Dynasty's medical facility gleamed with soft blue light. Officer Lee lay on a comfortable bed, while medical technicians placed the silver crown-like device on his head. Ambassador Park stood nearby, monitoring the equipment with careful eyes. Are you ready? She asked Lee. Lee nodded, his heart beating fast. The device felt cool against his skin. Captain Kim and Marcus's Aunt Regina watched from behind a glass wall. Beginning empathy immersion, a park technician announced. The world went dark. Then suddenly, Lee wasn't himself anymore. He was 4-year-old Marcus, sitting on his father's lap, looking at pictures of stars and planets. He felt the pure joy of a child who dreamed of exploring space like his dad. The memories began flowing faster. He was 6, playing in a park when another child's mother pulled her son away, saying, "We're leaving." He felt the confusion, not understanding why. He was 8, watching his father give careful instructions. Keep your hands where people can see them. Speak softly. Move slowly. I know it's not fair, son, but these rules might save your life one day. He was 10, winning the school science fair with a prize. 1 week after the empathy immersion, Officer Lee sat in a community center meeting room. Park Min-ji, Ambassador Park's daughter, and an expert in cultural rehabilitation, stood at his side. They faced a room full of police officers who had come to hear about his experience. I thought I was protecting people, Lee said to his fellow officers. His voice was quiet but clear. But my fear and prejudice made me see threats that weren't there. I want to tell you what I learned from experiencing Marcus Williams's memories. As Lee spoke, the room grew silent. He described how it felt to be a young black child learning. He had to be careful around police. He explained the weight of carrying other people's fear every day. Some officers looked uncomfortable, but they listened. Park Min-ji watched Lee carefully. She had been assigned to guide him through his transformation. Share with them what surprised you most, she suggested. The exhaustion, Lee said. I never knew how tiring it is to constantly think about how others see you, to plan every movement, every word, just to make others feel safe, and still know that it might not be enough. After the meeting, Park Min-ji walked with Lee through the city park. You are making progress, she said, but talking to other officers is only the beginning. Lee nodded. I want to do more. I've asked Captain Kim to let me work with the community relations team, and I want to help train other officers using what I've learned. They passed a playground where children of different races played together. Lee stopped to watch them. They don't feel fear yet, he said softly. They haven't learned to be afraid of each other. That is why your story is important, Min-ji said. The parks believe that change must start with understanding. You have seen the truth through another's eyes. Now you can help others see it too. Later that day, Lee visited the hospital where Marcus was having his final checkup. He stayed in the waiting room, respecting the family's wishes to keep his distance. Regina, Marcus's aunt, saw him there. "Marcus knows you went through the empathy immersion," she said, sitting down near him. "He's been asking questions about it." "How is he doing?" Lee asked. "Better physically. The nightmares are less frequent now." Regina looked at Lee carefully. "He watched your speech to the police officers online. He said it seemed like you really understood." Lee felt tears in his eyes. "I do now. I wish I had understood sooner." As they talked, Park Min-ji arrived with news. The Park dynasty had reviewed Lee's progress. They were impressed by his genuine change and his efforts to share what he had learned. They would proceed with sharing their medical technology with Earth. "Your transformation has shown us that humans can grow beyond their prejudices," Min-ji explained. "But we want you to continue your work. Other officers need to understand what you now know." Lee thought about the children in the park, playing without fear. He thought about Marcus's dreams of space, temporarily shaken by one moment of prejudice. He thought about all the other potential Marcus Williamses out there, deserving to live without constant fear. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said. "This isn't just about making things right with Marcus anymore. It's about making sure this never happens to anyone else." The Unity spacecraft landed at the International Spaceport on a clear morning. Dr. James Williams stood at the exit door, his heart racing. After 3 months in space, he was finally home. Ambassador Park Ji-won stood beside him as the door opened. Reporters crowded the landing area, held back by security barriers. Camera flashes lit up the morning air. But Dr. Williams only looked for one face in the crowd. Marcus stood with his aunt Regina, waiting for his father. "Dad," Marcus called out. Dr. Williams broke protocol and ran down the steps. Father and son met in a tight embrace, both of them crying. The cameras captured every moment, but neither of them cared. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here," Dr. Williams whispered to his son. "I came back as soon as I could." Ambassador Park watched the reunion with gentle eyes. Behind her, the rest of the Park dynasty delegation emerged from the spacecraft, their blue uniforms shining in the sunlight. Later that day, in a private meeting room at the spaceport, Dr. Williams finally met Officer Lee face to face. Park Min-ji and Captain Kim attended as witnesses. The room felt tense with unspoken emotions. "I've watched all the videos," Dr. Williams said quietly, "both the incident and what came after. The speeches you've given, the work you've been doing with the police department." Lee sat straight in his chair, his hands folded on the table. "Sir, I know nothing I say can make up for what I did to your son." "No, it can't," Dr. Williams agreed. "But I understand you went through the empathy immersion. You experienced my son's life memories. Tell me what you learned." Lee's voice shook as he spoke. "I learned that I had been afraid of something that didn't exist. I saw through your son's eyes how the world treats him differently, how he has to think about every move he makes, every word he speaks. I felt his love for science, his dreams of space, and I felt the moment when Lee paused, fighting tears, when I hurt him for no reason except my own prejudice." Dr. Williams listened carefully. Park Min-ji spoke up. "Lee has become one of our strongest advocates for police reform. He's helping us develop a training program using a modified version of the empathy immersion technology. The Parks believe that understanding comes from experience," Ambassador Park added, entering the room. "Your son's willingness to share his memories and Officer Lee's willingness to experience them has opened a path forward for humanity." Dr. Williams looked at Lee for a long moment. "Marcus has asked to meet with you," he said finally. "He wants to understand your change for himself. Would you be willing to talk with him?" Lee's eyes widened. "Yes, of course. Whenever he's ready. He's waiting next door," Dr. Williams said. "But before I let you near my son again, I need to know one thing. What would you do differently if you could go back to that evening?" I would see him, Lee said simply. Not my fears, not my prejudices, just him. A young man walking home from the library, dreaming of the stars. 1 year later, the police academy's main lecture hall was filled to capacity. Marcus Williams stood at the podium, facing a class of new police recruits. Officer Lee sat in the front row, while Dr. Williams and Ambassador Park watched from the side. My story could have ended that evening, Marcus said to the quiet room. But instead, it became the beginning of something important. Today, you'll experience what Officer Lee experienced. You'll understand what it means to walk in someone else's shoes. The modified empathy immersion devices sat ready on each desk. The Park dynasty had worked with Earth scientists to create a training version that could share selected memories safely. Every new police recruit now had to complete this training. Before we begin, Marcus continued, I want you to know that this isn't about blame. It's about understanding. Officer Lee showed us that real change is possible when we truly see each other. Lee stood up and joined Marcus at the podium. They stood together now, no longer victim and attacker, but partners in creating change. Lee spoke next, his voice steady and clear. A year ago, I thought I knew what it meant to protect and serve, he said. But I was protecting my own fears instead of serving my community. Through Marcus's memories, I learned what real courage looks like. It looks like a young man following all the rules even when those rules aren't fair. In the audience, Park Minji watched with satisfaction. The program she had helped develop was now being used in police departments across the world. Reports of racial profiling had dropped significantly wherever the training was implemented. After the lecture, Dr. Williams met with Ambassador Park in his office at the Space Center. The walls showed pictures of Earth's first hospital, using Park Dynasty medical technology. Thousands of lives had already been saved. Your people kept their promise, Dr. Williams said. Both the medical technology and the empathy training have changed our world. Ambassador Park smiled, and your people proved worthy of our trust. Look at your son. He took a moment of pain and turned it into a force for change. Outside the office window, they could see Marcus and Lee walking together in the Space Center's garden. They were discussing plans to expand the empathy training to schools and other institutions. Did you ever imagine this outcome? Dr. Williams asked. When you first saw that video of my son being tasered, we had hope, Ambassador Park replied. The Park dynasty believes that the greatest changes often come from the darkest moments. When humans face their mistakes with courage and honesty, they can transform them into opportunities for growth. That evening, Marcus sat with his father in their backyard, looking at the stars. The 3 suns of the Park dynasty's home system were visible as bright points of light. Next month, I start my training as a space diplomat, Marcus said. Officer Lee wrote my recommendation letter. Dr. Williams put his arm around his son's shoulders. How do you feel about that? A year ago, I was afraid to walk home from the library, Marcus answered. Now I'm helping change how people see each other. And soon I'll help Earth build relationships with other worlds. He smiled. I feel like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Above them, more ships from the Park dynasty entered Earth's atmosphere, bringing new medical technology and empathy training devices. The incident that could have destroyed humanity's future had instead opened a door to greater understanding, not just between humans and aliens, but between humans themselves.